This is my arcade machine. I built it myself with my own 2 hands. See, I have arcade sticks and buttons all wired up, and inside you can see it's powered by my Super Console X Pro. Neat, huh? What's that? You want to know how I set this up and how you can do it too? Well, alright, fine. I'll show you, since you asked so nicely. Oh hey, hi there, I'm TechDweeb. If you're new here, welcome. Let me tell you about myself. I'm 40, I live in my mom's basement, I have a cat that hates me, I can't eat dairy, I have a medical condition called verilopharyngeal insufficiency, and I like building PCs and playing retro games and making YouTube videos for dweebs like you. A few months ago I finished what might be my greatest accomplishment. This is my wall-mounted, low-profile arcade machine, and it's pretty dang badass if I do say so myself. I made a video where I showed you how I built it, and I even provided the schematic for the design. I'll include a link to that video below if you want to see the details of how I made it. But real quick, I just designed it based on my needs. I had a local furniture maker build the basic shell. It wasn't complicated or expensive. And then I painted it. I used paint markers to draw some not so professional doodles all over it. Then I added my arcade hardware, which is my arcade sticks and buttons. I'll show you more about how I set that up in a bit. And then I added my screen, which is just a PC monitor, and I added some speakers, and I added a marquee attached to some transparent acrylic, and I put an LED light behind it, so it would look all like a real backlit arcade marquee. And then I wired it all up with my Super Console X Pro. Well, more about that in a bit. And then I mounted it on the wall using a French pleat method, and I have the whole thing powered by a power bar with a wireless switch, so that I could turn it on with a push of a button. And it's, well, I don't mean to toot my own horn or anything, but what the heck. Toot. It's pretty freaking awesome if you ask me. My whole life I've wanted this. An arcade machine of my own, and I finally have one. And not only that, it has like over 50,000 games on it, with an attractive, easy to navigate front end with all my systems and games all nicely displayed with box art and videos and all that stuff. And you know what's neat? I didn't have to do anything special to set this up. You want to see how I did it? No? Well, too bad. That's why I made this video that you're watching, so I'm gonna tell you anyways. If you want to do something like this, you'll need 2 special pieces of hardware. First, you'll need a Super Console X. There are lots of versions of the Super Console X. I can't say for all of them, but I'm gonna venture and guess that they all work basically the same. I used the Super Console X Pro in this machine, which I reviewed on my channel. It was actually my first video, believe it or not. I'll link to that in the description below. But I also reviewed the Super Console X Cube, which is probably the one I'd recommend for lots of reasons. I'll include my link to my video review of that device in the description below as well. But really, I think that any Super Console system should work fine. Or other systems too, like that Pocky Box or like a Batocera PC. Really, as long as it supports USB joysticks and it has a USB port, you should be good to go. Speaking of which, the second thing you'll need is a USB arcade stick kit, which will come with all the buttons, the joysticks, the USB controller board, and all the little wires that you need. You'll need 2 buttons for start and select. These are usually smaller buttons, and you want at least 6 face buttons, or maybe 8 face buttons if you want to do some more advanced emulation like PS1 emulation or whatever. I think 6 is fine for the vast majority of games you'll be playing arcade style. I went with 6 and I've never regretted it. I bought my kit off AliExpress, but there's lots of different versions of this kind of thing, and different colors and different styles. Some even have light up buttons if you wanted to get all fancy. The most important part is that you get colors that match the design of your device. I wanted to go with a black and orange and white theme, so that's why I chose these buttons. I'll link to the ones that I bought off AliExpress in the description below, but I recommend just searching around and finding one that you like. And, well, that's it actually. That's the only special stuff you need. Just the Super Console X and the USB joystick kit, and all the other stuff is basic stuff. Your cabinet itself, obviously, and a monitor or a TV, and some speakers if your monitor doesn't have speakers. But the USB joystick controls and the Super Console X are the only special things, and I'll show you how I set those up right Now, the first step is fairly straightforward. You need to install the buttons and the joysticks into your arcade cabinet. Or I suppose this will work for any kind of custom setup, like if you're making your own arcade fight stick or whatever. For me, it was just a matter of plugging in the little wires into the buttons and shoving the buttons in the button holes and screwing in the joysticks from underneath. Then you'll need to attach all the connections from your buttons and joystick into the USB controller board. I don't think it really matters which button goes where because we'll be setting up custom button layouts ourselves, but to make your life easier in case you encounter problems, you should probably plug the buttons into their specific connections on the USB controller PCB. Here's a diagram. Did you catch that? No? Okay, here it is again. And once you have that all wired up for player 1 and player 2, the last step is to plug the PCB into your USB cable, and then the USB cable gets plugged into the Super Console X. Now, the Super Console X comes with these cheap PlayStation controllers. You'll need to use one of these at the very start to set up your USB arcade joysticks, but once that's done, you shouldn't need to use these anymore. However, I'm going to recommend that you do keep them plugged in. Not only because then you can play Ninja Turtles with 4 players when the cute girl next door brings over her 2 other cute friends to hang out and play some games and have some drinks and play Truth or Dare, which totally happens to me like all the freaking time. Not only that, but if you ever have problems with the joysticks and buttons, at least then you'll have a controller to access the menus and stuff to help you set up the USB joysticks again. However, the Super Console X only has 2 USB ports, so I just used the cheapo USB hub that came with the Super Console X to plug all this stuff in at the same time, and that worked fine for me, no issues at all. So once you got all the hardware set up, it's time to set it up in the Super Console. This is actually very straightforward. It's so dang easy. Here's what you do. First, using the PlayStation controller that came with the Super Console, you'll need to press Start on the controller and then go down to the controller settings and select Configure a Controller. Now, it'll ask you to hold a button on the controller that you want to bind. So just hold a button on player 1 of your arcade. If you've installed the wires and everything correctly, it should detect your arcade controller just fine when you do this. If not, then something went wrong, either with your button wires or the USB hub or whatever. I can't help you figure that part out, but if you set it up correctly, it should detect your button press. Then it's just a matter of choosing which button to assign which control to. Set the D-pad directions to the joystick, and then Start and Select should be your little buttons. I put one of mine on the bottom and one on the side. You can also think of those as Start and Coin, if you like. According to the retro gaming nerds on Reddit, the proper configuration of your buttons is like this. Did you get that? No? Okay, here it is again. When it asks you to do any buttons that you don't have, like analog sticks or L2 and R2, you just hold down any button to skip that control. However, a very important button that you need to bind is a hotkey. I'm going to suggest that you set this as the same button that you used for select. I'll show you that in a minute. Once you have that set up, you should be able to use this to navigate the menus and stuff. The button that you set for A is the action button, so select the menu, and the button you set for B is the back button. The button that you selected for start brings up the main menu, which is where you'll access the global settings and stuff. And the button that you chose for select will bring up the specific options for whatever screen you're on. And one more step here, you'll probably want to set the controller that you just set up, the player 1 on the arcade, as the first player controller. So you do that by going into the controller settings and making sure that your USB joystick is the one that's chosen under the input P1 section. Mine's called Dragon Rise joystick, but yours might have a different name depending on whatever version you got. And hey, while you're in here, you might as well set up that second player controller as well. The same thing, you choose your buttons and then set that as the controller selected for input P2. I also like to set my PlayStation gamepads as player 3 and player 4, although confusingly they're listed as Microsoft Xbox 360 pads for whatever reason. And yeah, now you're pretty much done. You can navigate the menus to look through your games, select the game you want to play with the A button. Once you're in the game, your controls should work as expected. The game should play fine. If you're in any sort of arcade emulator, then the select button will be your coin button. You can exit the games by pressing the start and select button at the same time twice in a row. Same way that you do on the Super Console X with the PlayStation controller. And then you'll be back at the menu. I'm not going to show you all about how to set up and use RetroArch, but I'll link to my RetroArch setup guide in the description below. In that video, I showed you how to set up RetroArch and customize it on the Miu Mini, but the principles apply to any device. It's actually not as straightforward as you'd hope, so I hope that video helps you out. But right now, I'll just show you some of the basic functions. This is the way the device is set up by default. At least mine was. There's a chance that yours is different and you'll have to figure out your own hotkeys, but it should be the same as what I show you here. Your main function is you can access the RetroArch menu by pressing your hotkey button, which is select, and the Y button at the same time. This is the main RetroArch menu, and this is where you can do most of the stuff you'll need to do. You can reset the game, save your state, load your state, and of course access all those emulator options. Yeah, too much in here. Just check out my RetroArch video before you do any of that because it's a bit finicky. Here's the rest of the hotkeys. Hotkey and start exits the game, hotkey and X resets the game, hotkey and L saves the game, hotkey and B loads the game. Again, this is how mine is set up. If yours is different, you should just figure out which hotkey combo does what and write them down so you don't accidentally reset the game when you go to save your state. One more thing that I wanted to show you, because it's pretty important, at least it was for me, is to tweak the emulator specific settings. You can do this by pressing the select button when you're in the menu for one of your systems. For example, here I am in Game Boy, and I can use the select menu to bring up the options menu and then go down to the advanced system options. In here, you can select the default options for this specific system. So you see for Game Boy, I prefer to have it run at a 19:14 ratio without a bezel. And under the shader options, I really like this CRT curve filter because it makes the screen look like an old CRT, which makes the whole arcade feel more authentic, in my opinion. And you can see how my arcade is black and orange. Well, under colorization, there's an option to change the game colors to be orange, and it looks like this. How freaking cool is that? The Game Boy is my favorite system to play on this arcade cabinet for this exact reason. I've played more original Game Boy on this thing than any other system. I actually really love playing the Game Boy remakes of old arcade games like Galaga, Asteroids. The whole thing from the screen color and the CRT filter being played on my own custom arcade cabinet, it's just a freaking dream come true. I'm in TechDweeb heaven right here. Oh, one more thing, because it's kind of important. Some games, especially arcade games, might not work in the default emulator. Check out my Super Console X Cube video because in the case of these games, there's a simple fix. I'll tell you now, but my other video has much more details. What you need to do is just highlight the game that isn't working for you, open the options with the select key, and go down to Advanced Game Options. This will change the settings for this specific game. So here's one, Air Assault. When I start up this game, my system crashes. So I'm going to open up the advanced game options for this game and try out some of the different emulators. As you can see, there's several to choose from, and I found one that works, Final Bird Neo. So doing this through the game options means that this game will use that emulator, but the rest of the games will use the default emulator. Again, check out my other video for more about how that works. And, well, that's it, I think. That's how you set this up. And it's just freaking awesome to use a Super Console X like this. To be fair, you can get a setup like this going in other ways. You can have an arcade machine running off a PC, of course, maybe using a front end like RetroBat to make it all nice looking. Of course, I made a guide for how to set that up, link in the description below. The benefit there is that you can use it for other PC stuff, like running PC games and watching YouTube or other questionable video content. Or you could use an old PC or even an old laptop and install Batocera on that bad boy. Or you could build a Raspberry Pi and set up RetroPie, that's fun. Or some other Android box and install Emula yourself. Just add your own ROMs and you'll be good to go. But here's the thing, the Super Console X comes ready to use, right out of the box. It comes preloaded with all the emulators and the front end and all the games with box art or videos, all pre-configured and ready to use right away. And apart from the occasional game that needs some tinkering to get working, it basically all just works. The Super Console X series is, in my opinion, hands down the easiest way to get playing emulated games. It comes with over 50,000 games for crying out loud. Every freaking retro game you could ever want. And the fact that you can use it to power your arcade machine is just icing on the cake. Building this thing was one of my favorite projects of all time. And now I have an arcade machine to call my own. I've wanted this since I was a kid. This is like my dream come true. Make sure you watch my original video where I completely show you how I made this and provide the diagrams and schematics and files and stuff in the description below. So if you're thinking of making an arcade setup and are considering using a Super Console X, I hope you found this video useful, or at least inspiring. Now please let me know in the comments below, what do you think of my arcade setup? Do you have an arcade that you made yourself? What did you use as your system? And of course, if you have any questions or if there's anything I didn't explain enough, just let me know in the comments below. I'll help you out. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or the thumbs down button if you didn't. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. And as always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.